Welcome to storyflix. In this video, we will explain Crying Out in Love. This film tells the story of two high school teenagers who love each other, but they never reveal it. They will only know this a few years after hearing their previous recordings. How will the end of their love story be? Let's find out in Crying Out in Love. Crying Out in Love begins by showing a large ship sailing in the middle of the ocean. Due to a very heavy rainstorm, the crew decided to dump part of their ship's cargo. One of the discarded cargo ships was a statue resembling a girl. The scene changes to downtown Beijing. That morning, a young woman named Xiaoyi was approached by a postman from the future post office. The postman gave Xiaoyi a mysterious package. After Xiaoyi opened the package, she found a cassette and a letter from the future post office. Then Xiaoyi decided to go to the post office because she wanted to determine whether the package was delivered to her or someone else. Elsewhere, a 27-year-old young man named Qi was packing his belongings and a cassette player into his bag. That day Qi was about to go to his hometown, the city of Qingdao, by train. At the same time, Xiaoyi would travel to the post office located in Qingdao. On the way to Qingdao, Xiaoyi decided to play the tape and listen to it using a headset. In the tape recording, Xiaoyi heard a teenage boy's voice, none other than Qi, when he was 17 years old. The tape tells a lot about Qi's life in his high school days. The scene moves to the past, in 1997. That day young Xiaoyi and her classmates were warming up for swimming. Behind them, there was Qi and a friend named Zhu Lang, who was secretly observing the young Xiaoyi and her friends. In the conversation between Qi and Zhu Lang, it was known that Qi really liked the young Xiaoyi. The next morning, Qi went to school by bicycle through the streets on the harbor's edge. By chance, Qi met young Xiaoyi and her friends who were jogging on the streets. While Qi was engrossed in looking at the young Xiaoyi, a fishing hook that a fisherman had thrown around them suddenly caught in the zipper of Qi's pants. The young Xiaoyi, who saw that, burst out laughing while Qi was embarrassed and immediately rode his bicycle to run away from the place. Qi and Zhu Lang were seen fighting in class, and the rest of the class cheered them both instead of stopping the fight. The young Xiaoyi, who saw that, tried to separate the two of them, but the fight continued until, finally, a male teacher named Mr. Liu came and stopped the fighting. After that, Qi and Zhu Lang were called to the teacher's room to be punished for their behaviors. After Zhu Lang explained that he was only in self-defense and the one who started the fight was Qi, Mr. Liu decided to punish Qi by standing in the middle of the field throughout the lesson. While Qi was doing his punishment, young Xiaoyi watched Qi from behind the classroom window. Because the weather was very hot that day, Qi was dehydrated and fell unconscious. The young Xiaoyi who saw this looked surprised and worried. Sometime later, Qi woke up from his unconsciousness, and after realizing that it was getting dark, he decided to immediately go home. Just as he was about to pick up his bicycle in the parking lot, young Xiaoyi checked on Qi's condition. Mr. Liu had previously asked young Xiaoyi to wake up Qi. However, young Xiaoyi purposely waited and didn't wake Qi because she didn't want to disturb him. That night they finally went home together on their own bicycles. Qi then accompanies the young Xiaoyi to her house as an expression of thanks for waiting for him. When Qi arrived home, he immediately helped his mother sell at their home restaurant. When Qi's mother saw the bruises on Qi's face, she immediately scolded him for thinking that he had been in a fight at school. The next day, the school announced that classes would be closed for a few days due to the extremely hot weather. When Qi was relaxing under a tree by the pool, his friends purposely tricked him by throwing Qi into the pool. Qi panicked and screamed for help because he couldn't swim. The young Xiaoyi, who saw Qi sinking, began to worry and immediately helped him. When Qi woke up from his unconsciousness, he was shocked to see the beautiful young Xiaoyi's face right in front of him and immediately stood up. Realizing that Qi's ears had caught water, young Xiaoyi taught him how to get water out of his ears by jumping up and down and tilting his head. Young Xiaoyi said that she didn't expect a Qi who looked like a tough kid to actually could not swim. Shortly after that, Qi decided to go home because his clothes were already wet. As Qi left in a hurry, he accidentally left his book by the pool, so young Xiaoyi picked it up and put it away. The young Xiaoyi seemed to be smiling after reading a few pages from Qi's book. After the holidays, all the students returned to school to receive their previous exam results. Mr. Liu then distributed each sheet of the exam results to the students while reading out their scores. After Mr. Liu realized that Zhu Lang didn't go to school that day, Mr. Liu asked young Xiaoyi and Qi Da to hand over Zhu Lang's exam results sheet to Zhu Lang's parents and told Zhu Lang's parents to contact Mr. Liu. After school, young Xiaoyi and Qi Da cycled together to Zhu Lang's house. On the way, young Xiaoyi returned the book Qi Da had previously left in the pool while praising his writing skills. Then young Xiaoyi suggested to Qi Da to submit his writing to a radio broadcast program called The Fated Night because every writer who managed to win would get a prize and a cassette player. At first, Qi Da refused because he already had a cassette player at home, but he reconsidered after young Xiaoyi asked him to gift the cassette player to her. After Qi Da and young Xiaoyi arrived at Zhu Lang's house, Zhu Lang's father looked very angry that his son had skipped school and was busy hanging out with a bad boy. Zhu Lang's mother was annoyed that Zhu Lang had previously been involved in a fight at his school. Seeing Zhu Lang's parents' furious reaction, young Xiaoyi decided to hide Zhu Lang's low-scoring test results. After Qi Da and young Xiaoyi deliver the message from Mr. Liu, they both go home. Zhu Lang's little brother told Qi Da and young Xiaoyi that he knew of his brother's whereabouts on the way home. Qi Da and young Xiaoyi went straight to the place that Zhu Lang's little brother had told them about. When they arrived at the club's door, they saw Zhu Lang being kicked out by several men from the club. The men then ran after Zhu Lang and beat him. Seeing this, Qi Da immediately helped Zhu Lang, but he got beaten up by the men. The panicked young Xiaoyi immediately ran to the locals for help. Long story short, Qi Da, young Xiaoyi, and Zhu Lang managed to escape from that place and ran to the harbor. At the harbor, Zhu Lang apologizes to Qi Da because he made fun of Qi Da's mother before, so they get into a fight. As Zhu Lang went to buy soft drinks, young Xiaoyi wiped the blood dripping down Qi Da's nose with her handkerchief. Qi Da then kept the handkerchief in his trouser pocket. Young Xiaoyi then asked Zhu Lang to go back to school. Zhu Lang said he was willing to go to school if young Xiaoyi was willing to help him sign his exam results with a signature similar to his mother's. Since then, the relationship between the three has become more intimate. The following night, Qi Da and young Xiaoyi listened to the Fated Night broadcast program on the radio from their respective homes. At first, young Xiaoyi seemed happy because Qi Da's writing, successfully selected in the broadcast, was a story about her. Still, after hearing that the girl in the story died of blood cancer, young Xiaoyi became sad and disappointed. The next morning, Qi Da waited for young Xiaoyi on the road to school to give her the cassette player he had won to her. But the young Xiaoyi ignored Qi Da and left him behind. Qi Da, who initially seemed clueless, slowly realized that he had made a mistake and hurt young Xiaoyi's heart. Arriving at school, Qi Da punished himself by standing in the middle of the field during class time. When the heavy rain suddenly fell, Qi Da was still standing in the middle of the field. It made the young Xiaoyi feel worried, and she came up to Qi Da and asked him to stop while handing him a voice recorder. In the evening, Qi Da listened to the tape that young Xiaoyi had given him. On the tape, young Xiaoyi said that she felt very angry that Qi Da won the broadcast with a fake story, and she was annoyed that he didn't consider the feelings of people suffering from cancer outside there. The next day, Qi Da gave young Xiaoyi a voice recording tape containing an apology to her. Since then, the relationship between Qi Da and young Xiaoyi has become even closer. They seem to have feelings for each other, but don't dare confess it yet. The scene switches to the adult Qi Da, who has already reached the city of Qingdao. The adult Qi Da seemed to be recalling past memories of when he was still able to be with Xiaoyi. The scene changes to the past. That day, Qi Da took swimming lessons with an old man named Li Fusheng. Li Fusheng is a fortune teller and owns a future post office. Li Fusheng purposely built the post office to help people send goods to their loved ones in the future. Li Fusheng explained that a place or dimension could connect us to the people we love, even though the person we love is gone. That dimension is referred to as the center of the world. That night, Li Fusheng asked the young Qi Da and Xiaoyi to come to a cemetery to visit the grave of a woman named Mei Xin. But Qi Da and young Xiaoyi still didn't understand why Li Fusheng called this woman's grave the center of the world. The next day, during the geography lesson, Qi Da concluded that Uluru, the largest sandstone in the world, was the center of the world that Li Fusheng was referring to. However, the young Xiaoyi thought that the center of the world in question was the peak of the Himalayas. The next day, Qi Da and Li Fusheng returned to practice swimming while conversing together. In their conversation, Li Fusheng said that their swimming coach, Miss Soon, was the daughter of his first love, Mei Xin. Li Fusheng explained that back in 1967, he met Mei Xin and fell in love with her. They spent a lot of time together and love each other a lot. When Li Fusheng had to leave Mei Xin due to military service, they exchanged letters. But in Mei Xin's last letter, she said that she had to marry another man her parents had arranged for her. That day when Li Fusheng and Mei Xin met for the last time to bid farewell, she had an accident and died right away. Li Fusheng felt very sad and couldn't let Mei Xin go. When Li Fusheng died later, he intended to bequeath his future post office to Miss Soon, the daughter of his first love. The scene changes to the moment when Miss Soon has inherited Li Fusheng's future post office and becomes the post office owner. That day, an adult Xiaoyi came to the future post office and asked about the mysterious package sent by the office. Elsewhere, the adult Qi Da was walking around the harbor listening to young Xiaoyi's voice recording. Qi Da recalled the past when he and Xiaoyi came to the harbor lighthouse on her 17th birthday. In the past, young Xiaoyi always come to the lighthouse to wait for her father to see her. Xiaoyi explained that her father had made a very similar statue with her. But her father had to throw the statue into the seabed because of a rainstorm that endangered his ship. Young Xiaoyi's parents divorced when she was 14 years old. The young Xiaoyi always missed her father's presence and hoped that her father would come on his birthday. However, the young Xiaoyi's father never came to see her. The day after young Xiaoyi's birthday, Qi Da intends to help her to meet her father in Beijing. Qi Da enrolls the help of his classmates to pretend in front of young Xiaoyi's mother by saying that they are going on a study tour to Beijing. After Qi Da and young Xiaoyi arrived in Beijing, they immediately visited where young Xiaoyi's father was staying. But when young Xiaoyi saw that her father had a new family and a daughter, she decided to cancel her plans to meet her father. She felt very sad and did not want to see her father again. Seeing the sad and disappointed young Xiaoyi, Qi Da tried to cheer her up by taking her to an empty villa to see a very beautiful sunset. The young Xiaoyi smiled again and looked pleased with the sight. That night Qi Da and young Xiaoyi spent their time talking about the Xiaoyi statue at the bottom of the sea. The scene changes to the present, where the adult Qi Da meets Zhu Lang, who is doing a photo shoot on the beach. Qi Da tells Zhu Lang that he plans to find Xiaoyi's statue at the bottom of the sea. While elsewhere, an adult Xiaoyi talked to Miss Soon about the voice recording she got. Miss Soon then asked an adult Xiaoyi if she had previously been admitted to the Boxing Hospital, Qingdao, in 1998. And Xiaoyi confirmed that. The scene changes to the past when Qi Da accompanies the young Xiaoyi, calling her father at a phone booth in Beijing. While making a call, young Xiaoyi suddenly had a nosebleed and fell unconscious. Qi Da immediately took young Xiaoyi to the hospital. Qi Da knew that young Xiaoyi had previously suffered from anemia from young Xiaoyi's mother, but she did not realize that her daughter's illness would only worsen. The day after the incident, Qi Da, who was in class, was very worried about young Xiaoyi's condition and decided to come to the hospital to see how she was. Upon Qi Da's arrival at the hospital, he received news that young Xiaoyi was currently suffering from end-stage blood cancer. When Qi Da comes home from the hospital, he feels very guilty and regretful because he had written a lying story about Xiaoyi, who had cancer. Young Xiaoyi's father was finally willing to come to see Xiaoyi at the hospital. Young Xiaoyi's father felt very sorry that he had not seen young Xiaoyi since his divorce from his wife. The next day young Xiaoyi showed a room to a girl who had the same name as her and had the same illness. From this point, it could be seen that the adult Xiaoyi who was currently seeing Miss Soon was the 10-year-old little Xiaoyi that the young Xiaoyi had once been exposed to. That means the adult Xiaoyi and the young Xiaoyi are two different people. Miss Soon then explained to an adult Xiaoyi that the tape was a sound recording that the young Xiaoyi had sent for her on purpose. The reason the young Xiaoyi sent the tape to the adult Xiaoyi would be revealed in the final audio tape. The scene goes back to when young Xiaoyi's father got the news that his and Qi Da's bone marrow did not match the young Xiaoyi's bone marrow. However, the young Xiaoyi's condition was getting more critical by the day. That night when Qi Da came to see young Xiaoyi, she asked him to help her take her to the sea to see the statue of Xiaoyi at the bottom of the sea. Qi Da granted Xiaoyi's request because he wanted to make her happy. That night Qi Da calmed the frightened young Xiaoyi because she thought that she would never recover. The day after that, Qi Da and young Xiaoyi sailed out to sea to comply with young Xiaoyi's last wish. The young Xiaoyi leaned on Ki-da's shoulder, saying she didn't have much time left. Hearing this, Ki-da failed to hide his tears. While hugging young Xiaoyi, Ki-da tried to calm her down by saying they still had a lot of time together. Xiaoyi started to look exhausted and fell asleep on Ki-da's shoulder a moment later. At the same time, young Xiaoyi's father sailed on another ship to pick his daughter up. But sadly, by the time young Xiaoyi's father got to Ki-da's ship, young Xiaoyi had already breathed her last. After young Xiaoyi's departure, Ki-da received a sound recording cassette that young Xiaoyi had previously prepared. Young Xiaoyi once left the tape at Li Fusheng's post office to give to Ki-da 10 years later, when he was 27 years old. The scene shifts to the moment where the adult Xiaoyi is listening to the last sound recording of the young Xiaoyi. Through the voice recording, it was known that the young Xiaoyi had donated her eyes to little Xiaoyi when little Xiaoyi lost her sight after surgery. An adult Xiaoyi realized that the young Xiaoyi had already left this world. Elsewhere, the adult Ki-da continues his plan to find the Xiaoyi statue once dumped at the bottom of the sea. While diving to the bottom of the sea, Ki-da was suddenly hit by an ocean current, so he was thrown quite far. Surprisingly, after that incident, Ki-da actually managed to find a statue of Xiaoyi at the bottom of the sea. Ki-da immediately approached the statue and kissed it. However, because Ki-da's oxygen supply ran out, he passed out and began to lose consciousness. When Ki-da lost consciousness, he had a chance to meet the young Xiaoyi, but she asked him to wait a little longer and go back to his life. When Ki-da came to his senses, he smiled and was relieved to have found the young Xiaoyi. He managed to prove Li Fusheng's words about the center of the world that can bring us together with the people we love. In the harbor was an adult Xiaoyi who watched Ki-da from a distance. The young Xiaoyi's eyes have now met Ki-da again and witnessed his happiness. The moral that can be learned from this movie is to be careful with everything we say, especially regarding the people we love.